Is there any extra fees or anything like that if people want to put in staff? And is there any limits on growth?
No, I mean, the best part about the business is you can grow it as big as you like. The leads are always there, so if you want to continue to take work from gyms, you certainly can. The addition of staff means you can put on a second truck on the road, additional vehicles, however many you really want to put on. It's really up to you, and you can always take more work from gyms. That never stops. It just comes down to when you're available to be able to take on that work.
So Chris, thank you for joining us today on the Jim's Mowing podcast. Now, Chris, for those who don't know, you've got a really great association with your family and yourself with the Jim's Mowing as a group for many, I'd say decades. You've been involved with the company in some way. So do you want to just first give us your background and your family's sort of history with the Jim's group and Jim's Mowing in particular?
Certainly. My dad used to actually work for Jim way back when, before he bought the region here in New South Wales. He worked for Jim, I think, for 2 years as he's basically his ops manager or whatever you call it for just the mowing. That was way back before they even had cleaning. I came on board as a franchisee was that 20 odd years ago, 25 years ago now, and did that for about 3.5 years. And then after that, I came into the office, learnt the other side of the business, and have been in Jim's Mowing Sydney now for 20 years.
You've been one of the biggest franchisors in Australia for a long time. Do you want to just talk real quickly about the franchisor role? When you say in the office, like, what does that sort of mean? How you support new franchisees, and just sort of give people a bit of a guide as to the support that you provide?
Okay, so in the office, what that means is here in Sydney, we've got an office. We've had it for a long time. We have it so that it's not just where people go to someone's house and they're talked into a business. It's a professional outfit. We try and run it as such, as we would expect all the franchise owners to run their businesses professionally. And the support that we have here is we have an infield support manager that goes and helps new guys, sees them every second week, runs through any challenges that they may be presented with through that 2-week period, gets a bit of feedback as to how they're going with their income levels, and then ultimately looks to add value to their business and help them in any capacity that they can.
When you say add value to their business, what does that sort of mean? Like, is that just with the regular coaching calls, or like if they've got any challenges, they're just there on call to advise them, or how does it sort of work?
Well, it's to do with, one, if they need any quoting advice. So it typically comes with some of the bigger jobs that guys get. They get there and they're really lost for how to quote it appropriately to make sure that they're not leaving any money on the table or losing money in the job. And then secondly, it would be going through any facet of the business. So if they're doing a hedge and they're not doing it particularly well, it's a way of being able to say, okay, well, these are some of the things that you need to improve. Try and tackle it this way, give them better ways of being able to approach that particular job in the future, so they're less likely to cause issues for us, re-complaints and other things like that down the line.
Your office is based in Castle Hill, so people can come in and obviously they chat with you guys face to face, and you've got all the uniforms there so they can see exactly what they're getting, and it's a great little setup there. So how does that sort of normally work from a new franchisee perspective? So let's say, for example, someone watches this or hears and goes, I want to learn more, they inquire. Do you want to just walk them through the process?
Yeah, so we'd get them to come along to our office. We'd sit down, run through the steps involved in joining gyms. So we've got a brochure that we give them that pretty much outlines what they need to do, makes it as simple as possible so that they can tick every item as they go along the journey to joining gyms. We try and make it as simple as possible. That's the number one thing for us. But it also gives credibility to the business itself, I believe, by having the office here.
Yeah, because I've seen you've got 17 steps to becoming a Jim's Mowing franchisee book, and you do a video where you talk through it as well. So if anyone's interested, just put an inquiry online and request that, because it's a really good walkthrough and pretty much everything you need to know in detail at being a franchisee. Now, because you've been around for so many years, what type of person is suited to Jim's Mowing, and what type of person does well, like characteristics, traits? Who have you seen succeed over the years, and what's maybe some common things between them?
Well, I think it just largely comes down to good attitude. Someone who comes in with a really good attitude and isn't someone who waits for things to happen, they make things to happen. I think they're the ones that show the best attributes in gyms. I've been through people who have English as a second language and their English isn't great, who have done particularly well out of gyms. And you get the other flip side to that, where you get someone who English is their first language and don't do particularly well because they don't have the willingness to listen, take on board any advice, and are looking to change their ways if it's not going right. So the number one thing is you got to listen. If you listen to the people that have been there, done that, the chances of success goes up. If you're always giving excuses and you're not prepared to listen, well, the chances of success go way down.
And when you say be proactive in their business, sort of what do you mean by that? Because obviously as they join Jim's Mowing, they obviously will get some leads and things like that. But what else do the really good franchisees do to really excel?
They'll typically follow up on past leads. So, 3 weeks, 4 weeks after they've been to that job, if they've won it, they're on the phone again to that particular client. If they didn't, they'd be seeking feedback as to why they didn't win it. If it's price related, then they can always ascertain whether they can do things at a slightly cheaper price or whether it's, worth considering in the future. But ultimately, I think they've just got to look at the way that they do things and always look for those little 1% improvements, because you're always able to find something that you can improve in any business.
So it's really good advice. And I was going to say as well, then the training component of it, can anyone become a gyms mowing franchisee from the skills perspective? And do you want to just talk through the training component? Because you will have a lot of people that might be keen gardeners or they might be corporate world and wanting to make a shift. How's that whole process look for them?
Anyone can do it. It just, I suppose, the physicality of it will determine whether or not you can do it ongoing. I think that's where a lot of people get used to their own property and think that it's just going to be an easy thing where, you mow the lawn, you have a beer halfway through, you finish the lawn, you have another beer, and you think it's the best lifestyle in the world, which potentially that could be, but that's this day and age, you can't drink drive, so that's not an option. But I think it's just understanding what a physical day looks like. Some people have worked in offices and they don't really truly appreciate what the guys do, the workload that they tend to get through, and then guys who are looking for machinery that are going to help them through that workload. It's just getting into the business, understanding it from day one and understanding you're going to be doing hard yakka.
Take you to adjust when you're a franchisee, because I've done a few interviews with some people, some are different, like they might say 2 months or 30 days and the body starts getting used to all the muscles that weren't working before and now getting conditioned a bit to it. So back when you were doing it, how long did it sort of take you to get adjusted to the physicality of it?
I'm going to say probably 2.5 months.
Yeah.
It definitely, when I did it, I was 24. So I was a lot healthier fitter than I am now. So that was certainly a lot easier for me to be able to do it then. But you've still got a fair bit of time to go to get yourself match fit to be able to get through good volumes if you really want to make good income.
Now, is it a good type of physicality? So when we say physicality, is it like this? Because it is hard work to make it go well. But is it like a good feeling at the end of the day after you get adjusted to it, or sort of, do you want to maybe describe for people what to expect?
Yeah, look, it absolutely is a fantastic feeling, because you know that you're looking after your body because you're going through and you're walking so far. I think the average gyms guy walks about 20 Ks a day. It seems amazing that they can walk so far, but if they're getting through a reasonable workload, it's about that sort of amount of distance that they travel. But the one thing about it is I've never encountered a person who's joined gyms and has been successful who hasn't lost weight. And when I say everyone has lost weight when they start in the gyms business, just from the fact that once you get yourself into the business, you're doing anywhere between 8 and 10 mowing regular lawns for the average guy. They just can't not lose weight. It's physically impossible when you're moving that much.
Yeah, it's a better version of Ozempic because you get paid for it as well. I was going to... because that's the thing now, because I talk to a lot of people through training and I catch up with them a lot of the time after training. A lot of people come here, they say, getting out of the corporate world and stuff like that. But when you talk to them on the call 2 months later, whatever it is, a lot of them say health, like they just feel better mentally. Their partners know that they're just more happier. They're just seem way more relaxed after doing what they're doing. So what are the main benefits that you're sort of hearing from people, let's say a couple of months in or 6 months in? I'm sure you get a lot of compliments about it, or people saying, I wish you should have done it sooner. What are the main things people are saying to you about the change?
A lot of them have found that they're just more engaged with their personal lives. So they've either re-engaged with their partner, they're spending more time and better time with their kids. So I suppose those two areas really sort of, for a lot of people who haven't had that, it really casts a light on where they were probably putting work ahead of family. And this way they get to have the luxury of both, I suppose.
That's a great point. We say it's a lifestyle business as well, but that's a really good point with people reconnecting with families and stuff like that. That's a great thing to hear too. I was going to say as well then, expectations of franchisees coming into the business, let's say income-wise. Now you've got in your information pack, you've got some really good information, which I do encourage you to inquire. If you're in Chris's region, you'll get it. But do you want to just talk about income expectations? What can they expect? What is actually possible with a gyms buying franchise?
It's always hard to say the income expectation, but we've got a paid for work guarantee, which for us at the moment is $2,500 per week. We believe that the franchise owner should be able to achieve that without too many issues in their first, at least sort of be getting to that consistent number within the sort of first month to 2 months based on the work volumes that are coming in. Typically seeing most new guys getting somewhere between 30 and 40 leads in their first few months, which, that typically should get them around sort of 10 to 15 regulars per month. So by end of the third month, they should have the sort of 30 to 45 regular clients, depending on how far they're willing to travel. And then from there, it typically becomes a lot easier once they've built that regular base.
And do you want to talk about as well the concept of splits? So splits is something very unique to Jim's Mowing and to our system. Do you want to maybe just talk about the potential for someone to do a split with their business as well?
So typically when guys start up, they take a reasonably sized area, and as time progresses, they'll pick up referrals and stuff closer to home. They'll be looking at certain areas and they may have 20, 30 clients in that particular area, and it could be 3 or 4 suburbs, 10 suburbs, something like that. It's just hard to get to. Typically for us, certain parts of Sydney, if you start in one area, you're crossing over some major roads. Sometimes when you're going over those major roads, it takes some time. It just makes a bit more sense to sell off part of that client base that's over some of those congestion points and then realign yourself to say, well, I'm no longer going to go over that particular road, keep it a little bit closer to where I want to be, spend more time in this area. And as you get more localized, you tend to pick up a lot more work, which then leads to making a lot more money with less travel and more time on the tools.
Absolutely. That's good explanation. So just for people just to understand that, because I know Jim talks about this all the time, but essentially, yeah, you can package those clients that are maybe out of here and get your route more efficient. And then basically for what you sell that split for, you pretty much don't pay fees for a year or a year and a half, depending on how much the split's, I guess, valued at, which is a really, really great concept for someone. It makes their route more efficient, makes them more money closer to home. Plus they can offset their fees by selling a split.
Well, it certainly helps for people who don't want to go down the staffing route. Not everyone really wants to have that as an option, which is certainly understandable. And it just makes it a lot easier for guys to have that proximity close to home where then they may have their 80, 100 clients, whatever it is. And that gives them a good base to be able to say, well, I'm only ever sort of 5 minutes from home. Makes it a lot easier for them. If something happens to the kids, it just means they're able to act on it pretty promptly because they're not too far away.
I was going to say then, yeah, so you mentioned if you know, as a sole trader, that's a great option to do splits, maybe every couple of years or whatever it is and get your route more efficient and stuff like that and offset the cost of your fees with the split. But you can also, as you mentioned there, the staffing route. So do you want to talk about the options for staffing in Jim's Mowing? Is there any extra fees or anything like that if people want to put in staff? And is there any limits on growth?
No, I mean, the best part about the business is you can grow it as big as you like. The leads are always there. So if you want to continue to take work from gyms, you certainly can. And typically you'll get to a tipping point where you can't physically do any more yourself. So you've either got to add equipment or you've got to add staff, whichever one of those two options is going to make the most sense for your business at that time. But the addition of staff means you can put on one, you can put on a second truck on the road, additional vehicles, however many you really want to put on. It's really up to you, and you can always take more work from gyms. That never stops. It just comes down to when you're available to be able to take on that work.
I was going to say then, from the staffing perspective, what's the biggest business in your region? Like, who's got the biggest business in terms of staff?
I would say Osman probably has the biggest business.
Yeah.
I think he runs about 4 or 5 vehicles. So he certainly has a pretty big enterprise, but he also has multiple divisions. So he's not just in mowing, he's also in handyman, cleaning, and he might even have a blinds franchise as well now. So he's certainly building up his little empire, which is fantastic to see because it's always good to see someone being successful.
Absolutely. And I think the great thing people need to understand about the system, as you mentioned, is that there's no penalties or anything like that. If you want to grow and put on staff and things like that, you've got all the resources like yourself. They can talk to all other people in the division who do it as well. So yeah, it's encouraged as well if you can do it. But as you said, there's a split route as well. So if you don't want the headaches of staff and all those problems, you can have the split route as a sole trader and you can have a really good business doing that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I was going to say then, Chris, as well, with your offering, do you have like a package deal, sort of someone, like how do you get the sole trader off the ground? Like, do you have certain equipment you recommend or how do you sort of package it up for them?
The equipment, not so much. We've got a few different suppliers that we do recommend to the franchise owners, but ultimately they'll go and do the gym's training down there in Mooroolbark, which is a fantastic experience. They'll get introduced to a few different suppliers, be able to see the different, weights, how things feel, the balance of the particular machine so that they understand what they feel may be best for them. All commercial grade gear is good. It's very much, in my eyes, I don't see there's a real difference between any of them. You just got to pick your platform and stay with it because a lot of the stuff is interchangeable. So if you go with Honda, you can use all the Honda stuff. When you buy new gear, the old stuff is still usable, which is really good so that you're able to continue to use that machinery. But all the machinery is pretty good. I wouldn't pick one over the other in my opinion.
Thoughts on the battery and petrol sort of battle going on at the moment? I guess obviously the battery players are coming in and we've done some videos of Makita and things like that and seen them in action in the field. So what's your sort of thoughts about petrol and battery and maybe considerations for people regarding that?
I like the battery gear for all your handheld stuff. I really believe that that's the much smarter way for guys to go. I still am a bit 50-50 on the mowers. The mowers, I always love the Honda. I think the Honda's a fantastic machine, never goes too far wrong. So I would always encourage guys to stay in that space. But some of them in councils in Sydney, they're starting to get a little bit precious when it comes to going green route. A lot of the franchise owners are moving into that battery space because of that, and just in and around the waterways. They just seem to want guys to be using more of that type of machinery.
There you go. It's probably going to get, or maybe probably worse and worse moving to that, let's say, with councils, around the place wanting more battery gear and things like that, and engaging people that only use battery gear. So, yeah, but I think the mowers, when we've seen some tests, they're sort of getting there, but they're not quite there yet all the time. But they've sort of made a lot of improvements, let's say, to where they were 5 to 4 years ago. And I've seen some franchisees using the full setups, but as you said, some refuse to use it, and we use the full petrol gear as well.
Well, the one thing about it is it has come on leaps and bounds, which is fantastic, but they're really good if you're doing regular type work. So for those franchise owners that are sort of 2-3 years in, who have a reasonably complete run, that don't need it for the longer grass that the newer guys need to take on to get themselves into that maintenance type business, they're more than comfortable in using the battery stuff, because it is just that, it's maintenance. They're not going there to cut down a metre long grass down to something that's more manageable. This is stuff where they're only clipping off the top, making it neat and tidy for the customer, because that's what they're there for.
Now, what's used the Jim's Mowing difference from a customer perspective? Because there's obviously a heap of independents around, and even though Jim's Mowing's the biggest, there's still market share. There's a lot more, obviously, independents than Jim's Mowing franchisees. So what's the biggest difference for customers using a Jim's guy as opposed to an independent?
They've certainly got the luxury of having an insured person, someone who's police checked. I think they're the two big things, especially for a lot of the clients that we deal with, which is elderly and at-risk people with some of the insurance type work that we do. That's certainly two of the big areas that I believe. But then you go through the things that there's a standard in place, there's a complaints process that's in place that really helps the customer have that feeling of, I know that if I have a problem, I've got somewhere to go and complain, and something's going to be done, because they've got the reputation that comes along with that.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing now. I think a lot of the people we interview anyway, like they might try an independent the first time, guy doesn't come back, or it doesn't charge enough, for example, and he goes out of business and doesn't come back, and then they come to Jim's, or Jim's work guarantee, which I think a lot more people need to know about. Such a really unique part of the system. No one can compete with that, the Jim's work guarantee. And you know yourself, because you handle all the complaints. Like, you would be there are franchisees that are accountable to someone, whereas if you're an independent, what can someone do there? Don't answer the phone, or they leave a bad Google review, and that's it. Their issue's still not sorted.
Well, it's been funny. I've had people even phone Jim's Mowing for us to try and fix some of the independents' problems, and they even blame the Jim's Mowing guy for doing it wrong when it wasn't him. So I think sometimes that's good and bad, but it's certainly where customers, once they've gone through that bad experience, come to Jim's, they live it, and then it's hard for them to go elsewhere. And when franchise owners have left, for whatever their reasons are, it's funny how quickly the clients come back to Jim's.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So they do that, do they? Okay, that's a really good one.
Yeah, so we found it. We had a couple of guys who decided they didn't want to be part of the business any longer. They left, and then clients were finding out that they were no longer with Jim's. And then when they've checked for insurances and other bits and pieces, they're little things that sometimes they're not forced to do. So they neglect those items because it costs a little bit of money to run a business professionally. So, as soon as they start cutting some of those costs, it means that they no longer have the insurances in place, and, they don't get the regular checks and everything else that they need to.
I was going to say, so what type of work do the guys and girls do? So obviously the name is Jim's Mowing, but do you want to just outline some of let's say the basic task? And maybe you mentioned the franchisee there who has multiple franchises in other divisions, so who can obviously do a lot of things. But what's the scope of work that our franchisees can do?
The everyday franchisee is going to do your mowing, hedging, mower hedging, and then they're going to get into the gardening type work. Then there'll be guys that specialise in things like gutter clearing. They'll do high pruning, so high hedges and stuff like that. And then they'll get into other things like your high pressure cleaning as part of what they do, and odd jobs, depending on what aspects of the business that they really want to drive. I always find that usually about sort of 3 years in, guys will want to niche their business, where they'll set themselves up as the lawn care expert, or I do a lot more gutter clearing, and they're the new leads that I want, and only those leads, so that they can drive that business that ultimately is either more lucrative, or it's the aspect of the business that they prefer. So if someone wants to, deal with only top-end clients who have the really good lawns, and they go, that's what I want, so that's my showcase, then they'll typically go down that route of the lawn care specialist.
That's a really good point. I haven't heard anyone say that before. So just to reiterate to people, so 2-3 years in, as you said, you'll notice a lot of your franchisees make particular, they like doing hedging, or as you said, specific type of lawn types, whatever, and they can switch their leads off or adjust their business to really tailor it. They only get those works moving forward, and they shift into that.
Yeah, well, we drive heavily to say to guys, if you're going to stay as a single operator, you realistically only need 60 to 80 good regular customers. Once you get to that number, that's when you need to work out where your niche should be. There's plenty of different niches. If you're a gardener, if you prefer to do the hedging, the gutter clearing, whatever it may be, but it's really that niche where you're spending more of your time doing the things that you love a lot more than just chasing a mower. If you love mowing, fantastic. That's our name. God bless. But ultimately, it comes down to the fact that you're able to niche, you're able to then say, this is where I want to spend more time. And it is because that may be where you make a lot more income. You can always improve your income in those particular areas.
Don't talk about the Gyms Online system, because I think it's a really good system that people might not be aware of in the public. But do you want to talk about Gyms Online software for franchisees and what it allows them to do?
The beauty about the Gyms Online system is, unlike if you put a normal ad in the paper or on the computer, whatever it is these days, you can't really be specific about where you take your work. If a customer phones 10 suburbs away, you're stuck with whatever customers phone you. The beauty about the gym system is when we direct it all into the system, the franchisee can choose the suburbs that he's happy to take work in, and they may not necessarily be neighbouring suburbs. It could be, I've got one day that's 5 suburbs away, that's one area that I want, and nothing else anywhere near that, just because that's the luxury you have of being able to pick and choose what comes in out of the system. Then you've got the services, so all the different services that we offer, mowing, gardening, hedging, gutter clearing, irrigation, landscaping, it goes on. So they get to choose some of those other options to be able to then say, I'm happy to take that work, or no, that's not something I'm really interested in. And then the last one is the times they're available for work. So they get to pick and choose when they take new work from us. We don't just keep sending it to them because we're obligated to under the paid for work guarantee and all that stuff. The franchise owner really gets to pick and choose when they take the work to suit their business and that development of their business.
Let's talk about then holidays. So someone, let's say, wants to take off, let's say, a month in winter. Sort of how does that work, or what can they do in the business to cover that?
A lot of them will find themselves a buddy in the system. We encourage them to get to know their local franchise owners so that they're able to say, if any customer comes in during the time that they're away, that they're able to then get them to look after those as once-offs. We set it up in the system so that the call center, if they do receive any of those clients, that those customers are then referred to the other franchise owner as a do once. And then once they've done that, franchisee that's been away for the month, when he gets back, he knows that lead's going to come back to him, or that customer's going to come back to him when on his return to the business. So it's always really good to have that person to be able to be your backup system.
Yeah, well, it's massively important because if someone wants to take, let's say they have an injury, for example. I've interviewed a franchisee who had an injury in Ben Board's region in Geelong. He took 3 months off, and all his customers were covered. So when he was non-injured, he came back, and he was right to pick up his customer base again. Whereas if you're an independent operator, there's no chance you're going to lose all those customers. So I think it's a really important part of the system that you have other franchisees who are able to support you. I think it's really, really unique. I think it's something that that if you are someone considering gyms, I think that's a really important thing to take into account.
Well, it certainly comes into play when you've got a particularly bad issue where we've had franchise owners in the past who have ended up in hospital. There's not a great deal that they can do, but if they've set up their system to be able to then say, okay, well, these are my clients, we can then pick up from there and run with the clients and look after them the best we can. If you're in hospital and no one else knows what you're doing, it's going to be hard to look after those customers. So it certainly can be, a bad thing for someone who's doing it independently.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, that's why the network's so important. Because another thing people might think is that there's so many gyms mowing guys around. Is there enough work? Isn't it ultra competitive? No one's going to help me out. But maybe don't talk about how that's probably not the case, and it's quite the opposite, in fact.
We found early on there was a little bit of that competitive nature with people, especially when they first start. They may have come from using some of the other online platforms where they're competing against other franchisees for the work. Once they get to know the gym system and the fact that we only send to one franchise owner, so we're not trying to get more than one to go out and quote, they then get comfortable with other guys being in their territories, running around, because the more vans that people see, the more trucks that they see, the more likely they are of phoning gyms because they see them all the time, it then means that a lot more work's coming in, which then goes to the franchise owners that are happy to take it. So I really find that competitive side of things against other franchisees goes pretty quickly once they learn the system. And then once they've embraced the system and they see how it works, then they reach out to other guys and they're always happy to help. They're putting up, they've set up in our region, they've set up their own WhatsApp group that basically they're sharing work where they can't get to something, and they're leading on each other, which is fantastic to see. And any time they'll put up a question that to their peers, if their peers can't answer it, a lot of the times I'll give them 24 hours to see if they get an answer from their peers. If they can't, I'll get in there and I'll say, look, these are some of the things I found for you. Just wanted to make sure, letting you go and get it from your peers as opposed to jumping on them quickly and trying to smother them with that support.
I was going to say that about the fees. So obviously we see a lot online. People think, don't give gyms 40% of your earnings. Start your own thing and do a couple of Facebook ads and you'll have a thriving business. So do you maybe just talk about the fees component of the business, just to sort of clear up any incorrect information that people might have?
People always talk about the fees when they're thinking about gyms, but when you truly break down what gyms gets out of the franchise owner based on the income that they're potentially able to earn, it's a very small amount in respect to that. The lead fee's there because it's ultimately designed to make sure that you're only taking work that you need. You're not taking work that you don't, which then means that the client is getting looked after, which is the ultimate thing. If the client's getting a good experience, then they'll tell other people, gym gets more work, and the cycle goes on. So the lead fee is, in my opinion, one of the best things that ever happened in gyms, because it means people are looking after customers better because of that fee that they're paying. And then you talk about the actual fees themselves, and you start to say, well, if you spent the same money on doing your own online advertising or any other forms of advertising, you'd spend way more money than it costs you every single month. From the person that does it for 200 odd franchisees, I can tell you how much it costs us just to look after them. And I could imagine that just divide it by one, the 200, what we spend, and then you'd be there saying, well, the guys get great value out of the fact that we do all of that for them and take that problem away, which really makes it easier for them to just get on and do what they need to do, which is look after customers, be super approachable, happy, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, it's always quite frustrating for me because we obviously do a lot of content around this sort of stuff, and people are like, you have to pay for a lead even if it doesn't convert for a job and all these sorts of things. And like some of those lead fees are like $12 or $14 or whatever they are, and that customer you get belongs to you forever, and that could be a 10-year customer. He uses you every fortnight or whatever, and you look at the value of the actual customer to you from that one lead fee, it's quite a small amount.
I've actually got a slightly different take on this, Cole. Mine is I work on the numbers, and this is what the franchisees were telling me when I did the numbers at the meetings. They convert about 80% of the leads that we send. So if you work on, we send you 10 leads, the leads are going to cost you $120. You get it, and that's the discounted rate. Out of those $120, you're going to get 8 that do the work that you do the work for. Out of those, it's typically between $150 and $200 that you get as a return on that. So you're in and around that sort of $1,500, let's say, as a round number if you're in between the two. So you've got $1,500 from that, and then out of the 8 clients that you've got work from, 2 will convert to regulars. And they are in Sydney, they're worth anywhere between $1,500 and $2,000 to you per annum. I don't know about you, but $120 return on investment, and you're going to get yourself anywhere between $4,000 and $6,000 is a very good use of funds, in my opinion.
It is, absolutely. It's far better than crypto or anything like that. A way better return on investment. But you're right, and the reason why it's great to have that thing, because what you said is because I get it all the time online. It's quite. If people actually spend a bit of time looking at it properly, they would realize it's such a good deal as well. I remember we had the Mike Andys from the US come out and broke down the lead fees. He couldn't believe how cheap they were. And because he obviously, their system's a bit different to ours, but when he broke it down for franchisees in the room, I think they sort of realized, oh, geez, it's a very good deal we're getting. Because lead fees, as you know, still some people might complain about it sometimes, but it's an amazing deal. As you said, it's better for the customer as well. And the increase in the leads, in the leads that we're getting to the call center, for example, is directly as a result from the lead fees as well.
You've also got to look at it from the point of you may not secure every lead today, but it's not just what you get out of them from a work perspective, it's also what you learn from them. And the number one thing is if you're learning that you're expensive and you're not winning work because you are expensive, then you need to look at how you improve your offering and show the customer value to be able to get them that sort of money. So it's the learning you get out of the leads that you don't win, in my opinion, actually helps you grow as a business owner to be able to then say, in the future, I know what I need to do to continue to improve my conversion rate.
It's a great point. And what you said before,
while they may think that it's a lost lead and I haven't got something out of it today, as long as you get some learning out of anything that you do in a business, that's going to stand you in great stead.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, that the better franchisees are the ones who actually follow up and seek that information. So that's where you get the value from it as well. So it's a really good point. An 80% conversion rate is pretty good as well. If that's the average as well, I'd say compared to independent markets, it's just the gym's leads obviously will convert better than, let's say, if you're up against 4 or 5 people on the open platforms or whatever it is.
Well, I think the people that are going to some of those platforms are price shoppers. We're happy not to be getting the price shoppers. And the funny thing about it is I've done tests with the likes of High Pages and OneFlare and a lot of these other platforms. And the customers that they get are typically not customers that phone gyms. They get the customers that they get, and they obviously try and piggyback off the back of Jim's Mowing, which I've seen on a lot of their paid ads. But the luxury that we've got is the fact that people are seeking us out. Our number one term is Jim's Mowing that people are actually Googling. That they're coming in through that channel because they're going, I don't want someone else. I want someone from gyms.
Yeah, and people should try gyms the first time. Because what happens is they try one of those other platforms, they have a bad experience, they can't get any customer service at all. Then they come to Jim's Mowing and they use a franchisee and they never leave, which is generally, I'm sure, something you would notice as well.
Yep, it's always good to see.
And now let's talk about independent route versus doing a Jim's franchise route. Obviously, we're biased because we work in Jim's Mowing and we know, but I was just going to say, because obviously online we always get it, I get the responses all the time. You see it always yourself with ads would be, don't pay gyms. It's so easy. Just start yourself, get do a lot of box drops and away you go. You're going to have a thriving business with 80, 60 customers. I want to talk about the reality of the independent route. You've mentioned marketing costs before, and if people to do marketing properly, they have to have a website, they have to do AdWords, they have to drive traffic to it, which is a quite expensive exercise plus other things. You want to outline the reality of going the independent route as opposed to maybe a Jim's Mowing franchise?
The Jim's Mowing offering, in my opinion, because of all the training and everything that gets done for you and assisted with, is a much easier way to go. I also believe that it's not for everyone. I truly believe that if people want to go down the independent route, I think that that's a fantastic way for them to go and learn, because ultimately, if they've got that way of them not wanting to listen to someone, I don't particularly want them to come into Jim's Mowing in my region, because I want people who are coming in with great attitudes, who want to learn, who really want to learn, not just, okay, well, I want to go and earn money as a mowing contractor. They really want to come and learn about the lawn care aspects of things. They really want to be able to see ways of improving their business and having someone to be able to support them in that, instead of just thinking that this is the way, this is my way, and I've just got to do it. They typically don't end up being good franchisees because they won't listen and they won't learn from the customer. And ultimately, I think that's where a lot of them will fall over, is because they won't seek to learn. They'll just think that I'm the one, I know what I'm doing. And unfortunately, that's not always the case, and that you tend to see them not do particularly well and not be in the industry very long, because that seems to be a very common thread, that I used to have a mowing guy, but he's gone out of business, and hey, presto, gyms are in there.
I've had a few people come through training recently. I've actually had one guy who had a really successful business in Melbourne as an independent, and he sold it after 5 years. And I asked him, well, why did you come and do Jim's Mowing? He said, I know how hard it is to start a business. Going to Jim's Mowing route is just far easier. I'm moving to Queensland. I know no one there. I know how much easier it is. I thought that was a really good thing for the system, that an independent guy who was successful for 5 years, sold his business, knew the realities of how hard it is to start up a new business in a new location, and thought, I'm just going to go to Jim's Mowing. It's a far better deal, less marketing costs and reputation, and it's a far easier option for me and my family. So I thought it was a really good little interview we did a while back with it around the realities of starting a business. It might sound good in theory and easy in theory to start an independent business, but the reality, it generally isn't.
Well, you just got to see how many people actually fall over in small business inside their first 12 months. yeah, the fees are there, but the best part about the fees is they're there with the support that comes with it, albeit that you've got that additional cost. It's cost that you put into marketing if you were doing that yourself. If you weren't, then your business is less likely to be successful anyway. So it's either one way or another.
If someone does their research and gets let's say they're going to do an inquiry with Chris, and you can look at the actual fees, what you pay per month and break it down per week, you'd be spending far, far more just on lead gen alone than what the fees are per week, plus you get all the support and everything else with it, plus the brand and things, something where it's just a far better deal. But I was going to say then about the brand, because we obviously always talk about the brand. What does that mean to you? Does it mean something where we get a better customer, better client quality, it's far easier to win quotes? What does the brand mean to you from Jim's Mowing perspective?
I think it just opens up a lot more doors. You look at the commercial type work, I mean, that's, for a lot of commercial type work, it's hard to get your foot in the door regardless of who you're from. But that brand just helps you, one, get into those type businesses a little bit easier. It's also the fact that when people see it, it's a well-known brand, everyone knows it. And when people see it on the side of the road, it's easy to then say, okay, well, I know that's a Jim's Mowing guy. I know he mowed number 5 Main Street. That's the guy I want to come out and mow my lawn because I've seen the quality of work. Whereas I don't think that quite happens. The franchise owners get so many walk-ups just because of the way that they're branded. And I think that is massively underrated in regards to gyms because, when I speak to franchise owners and they talk about the 3 to 5 walk-ups they get a week, I'd be amazed if the independents are getting anywhere near that.
Yeah, I've done a few down the roads with franchise owners, and whilst we've been out filming, we have people walk past, they look, and they come back, and then they go, can you give me a card, or can you quote my house? It's just up there. So we've actually got that on video multiple times. So it's quite a common thing. I was going to say as well then, Chris, the horticulture side of the business. So you mentioned gardening before, training opportunities. I know I've actually interviewed a few franchisees that are actually qualified greenkeepers before they come into Jim's Mowing, because a lot of people might have this misconception that, the person who comes to training, sometimes they might just be completely unrelated background. But we have a lot of people who have greenskeepers, horticulture, they work for a landscaping company before coming into gym. So do you want to talk about that actual training side and the horticulture side of the business?
Okay, so in regards to the horticulture side of things, they get a little bit of horticulture down in Melbourne, and then we've got other things that we do part of our ongoing training here. But in respect to the people that come from that industry, it always makes it a lot easier because they've got the knowledge to be able to run the business. Then all we need to do is help them with the book work and making sure they're quoting the right price for the work they do. They understand all the other parts of it, which makes it a lot easier for us because we're not having to educate them on that, which is what tends to happen with people that come from the corporate background. So it makes it a lot easier. I'm yet to find a greenkeeper or a landscaper or anyone in that category fail in my region. I've never had that happen. Those guys that come in from that particular aspect of the world, they come in and they absolutely kick goals from day one. They smash it because they know all the ins and outs of the back end of things, which makes it a lot easier. Customers know that they've got the knowledge, and then because they have that additional knowledge, they're able to charge a bit more for it.
Outside of it, is there something where you guys get them into Cert 3, Cert 4, or what's the other training component you can do for them?
So we do more of the training is not so much the hort, but more so the lawn care.
Yeah.
Because that's an area where they can make a lot of additional money by lawn sprays, fertilizations, and then renovations to make sure that the properties that they're looking after are as good as they possibly can look, which then attracts more customers because it's the best looking one in the street. It's got, it's deep green where everyone else's is turned a bit yellow or something like that. So it certainly adds value in that respect. And then we've got a business here called Flower Power that does a little bit of training for us in regards to pruning and other things like that. So we've always got other businesses that we leverage off, like a Cut Above, that they're all pruning. They do a presentation every single year to the new franchise owners that come on board, how to rose prune, how to fruit trees and things like that. So that the guys get real hands-on training so they know exactly what they're doing when they get out there.
And what about the meetings? Do you have regular meetings for everyone to get together, or how does that sort of work?
So we have 4 in face-to-face meetings every single year, the change of seasons. Our new lot coming up for autumn, where we'll talk to the guys about all the different aspects that they need to be considering for the autumn period so that they're starting to change a bit of the way that they're thinking. We'll pass through the heaviest of the mowing by the time we get to autumn. So we're getting into that stage where we've got to start setting ourselves for winter, making sure we've done all our preparation to get through the winter without any hiccups.
Think about that in the winter side of it. So sometimes people, obviously winter, depending on, your business might change a bit, or how do you prepare them to prepare for winter? Like, is it around proactively offering your customers different services, or what do you sort of do in that area?
There's two areas that I encourage franchise owners. One is to start looking at all the properties, make a list of everything that the extra services that they can provide the customer, put the pricing next to all of it, and then start having the conversations with them about there's times through the winter months that they can get through to each of those items, and then start booking them in when they would normally be there for a mowing service. So instead of going from 2 weekly to 4 to 6 weekly for the mowing, that they're there every 2 weeks, but instead of doing the mowing this time, they're going to do some other aspect of the property, and then obviously charge the customer the appropriate amount of money based on the time and effort that's put into that particular aspect. Ultimately, it comes down to the franchise owner speaking with their customer about those additional services.
Now, you mentioned commercial work before. Is it something you guys arrange, or how does the commercial work side of the business go with body corps and things like that?
So we've got a few aged care providers that we do work for and with. There's quite a few different ones here in Sydney that we've been working with for quite some time now, which just means that we've got jobs that come through for the franchise owners, a bit of bread and butter stuff that just helps them have that income that's coming through that helps with obviously growing their business.
And go and talk about the, you mentioned it before, I should have asked about, because sometimes you've got a lot of people who are really capable of doing it, and they always say, I should have done this years ago, but there's always that, maybe a detractor talking about it, was I don't understand gyms, or they find it hard to get off, let's say, that fortnightly pay to the unknown of being your own business. So you mentioned the pay for work guarantee. So maybe you just talk a bit more detail about that pay for work guarantee and how it's designed to sort of maybe alleviate some of those fears.
So it's set there so that you've got that minimum guarantee each week, provided that you do the promotional services that assist you to get to the amount of income that you should have generated for the week. The best part about it is it's there for 12 months or 250 leads, whichever comes first. Typically, if it was 250 leads, you'd have about 60 to 70 regulars. So you've got a pretty good business anyway. And then 12 months in business, by then, if you haven't made something work, then it's probably not going to be a good outcome anyway. But in respect to for us at the moment, it's 2,500. That's the income that we look to send through to the franchise owner each week. They quote it, they do it, they get paid by the customer. Our aim is to get them a lot more than that, but that's the minimum guarantee. So it's there so that they've got the ability to earn the income that they need to be able to pay their bills in the early stages of running their business. Ultimately, it comes down to them to make sure they're promoting their business, which is why they need to have that can-do attitude and be approachable and happy to push their business, because ultimately they're going to be the ones who make the success out of it over and above what we can offer them.
Awesome. I was going to say as well, misconceptions about gyms mowing. So we've spoken a lot in detail about how the systems it works and that. But what are the common misconceptions or just wrong ideas people have about being a franchisee in gyms mowing that you can clarify? The big one we get is, we've already talked about it, gym doesn't take a percentage off your profit or your jobs or earnings. That's probably one of the biggest ones.
People are always going to throw crazy ideas out there in respect to all. When it comes to paying someone, they always have the worst impression of what someone's likely to do. Unfortunately, it's just nowhere near the case. I think that they worked out on the average here for the guys, it works out to be about 8% of what they spend with gyms is the franchise fee. If you go into almost any other franchising network, 8% is unheard of. It's so low in relative terms. So it's a fantastic outcome for the franchise owner. Now, if you're looking to do something part-time, well, it's going to be a lot bigger than that. So it's not really a part-time business. It needs to be something that you really investigate to do properly. If you're coming into it with the mindset of saying, I'm going to replace my income, or I'm going to replace my income plus more, ultimately you'll get there, provided you set what that more is. And I think that's the number one issue is people come in with a negativity instead of coming in saying, I'm currently making $1,500 a week after tax. That's what I'm on, instead of going, well, what does better look like for you? Is it 4,000 a week? Is it 5,000 a week? Because all of that's attainable in gyms. You just need to be prepared to listen. So if you want to make a lot of money, well, you need to sit down and work out, okay, what are you prepared to do for that? Are you prepared to, do a 10-hour day instead of, where you on the clock, you check in at 9, you leave at 5, and you go, well, that's my day. Well, this is your business. If you want more out of it, you got to, 1, do the time, and then 2, you've got to then say, okay, well, I'm working longer and harder hours, and yeah, I'm making a lot more money, but how can I be smarter about this? How can I then leverage into staff? How can I leverage into a ride-on mower or other bits of equipment that are going to help you get through the same work, but in less time, which means that ultimately you get to where you want to be anyway. But that's, as the business owner, you've got to think through those problems. You can't just expect that, okay, well, I clock in, I clock out. You've got to spend the time and make sure it works for you.
I want to ask you about the ride-on, because it can be quite a big expense for people. It can be sometimes a scary decision for them to purchase. So how would you sort of advise, let's say, a mowing franchisee, like when should they look at a ride-on maybe, or how would they do the calculations to work out should they invest in one or not?
There's 2 ways that I think about that. One is if they get the job that pays for it. So if you get the first job that you say, well, that's 100% a ride-on job, I really shouldn't be push mowing it for just getting through it. And it might be a $300 or $400 a month job, depending on what it may be more. But again, as a minimum, it needs to be sort of a $300-$400 job, because I think most ride-ons that are commercial based, 10,000 plus. So if you were renting to own it or you had some sort of finance on it, you'd be there saying, okay, well, at least that one job is covering that machine. And then from there, I then need to be able to put that onto multiple properties. So if I'm able to put that onto 100% of my front lawns, and that gets me through, an extra 10 jobs a week, it's well and truly paid for itself. So I think it all ultimately comes down to doing the maths on how much quicker is it going to make you. If you can get it onto back lawns and other areas, it means that it's going to ultimately be a better bit of gear that you need to have. The number one mistake guys make is they get the wrong bit of gear. And it's always when they get into, someone will talk them into a 48-inch mower, when realistically they should have got the 34 or the 36-inch mower. They could have got a rider for, 32 inches, which gets onto the back lawns, which then gets them a lot more access to getting through a lot more work. Again, it just comes down to the person spending the time to doing their due diligence, which they would have done coming into gyms, that they do on every single aspect of their business is, how can I improve?
One of the main things, like, you mentioned it a few times, is just the best people who have the best good attitude and coachability. That's probably the main sort of traits that with people who do well.
Yeah, and they're not afraid to ask the question, the dumb question. That's where I think people hate going, I look silly in front of someone. That's not me. I don't want them, because they've come from that corporate world. If you ask a silly question, then maybe you don't get the promotion, or maybe you don't get the next opportunity. Whereas here, it's like, mate, ask the silly question, because ultimately you get told the answer, and then you can move on, and no one's going to judge you. You just get on with things.
Absolutely. I was going to say as well, is there any stories from your time that stand out with people, like you've seen a transformation, maybe somebody coming maybe wasn't as confident, or this was their last opportunity and they've transformed themselves? Is there any sort of stories of franchise owners over the years that stand out to you?
I'd probably say that there is one that was, I suppose, more of a feel-good for me than anything. Was I had a franchise owner. I was looking at his at his board, because he sort of got to the 12 months. He was floundering a bit and saying, look, it's okay. It's not going as great as I was hoping it would. And I just had a bit of a look at his board, and then I started going through, and I did what I call a bit of a business review off what I can see on FMS. And one of the things that was noticeable was he was quite cheap in the work that he was doing. Customers loved him. He got 5 stars with all that stuff. But the constant message that they kept coming back was he was on the cheaper side of things. And then when I had a bit of a chat to him, I said, well, what are you getting per day? Started delving into some of the questions that you would normally ask someone who's sort of, not really happy with where they're at in the business. And he said, look, he was making, I think, about sort of $500-$600 a day. And he's going, look, it's okay, but it's not great. And then I said to him, well, when have you ever gone in with higher pricing? When have you tried to, you might think it's a $60 job. Have you tried getting 80? Have you tried getting $100 for that job? You're so busy that you can't take on any more work. So if a customer says no, what have you lost? You've lost nothing. So I said, let's go through the first 10 clients. Let's get them all up $30. I said, and if you lose them, they're easily replaced because you're getting people knocking on your door every day. And then I said, let's just focus on this for the next 3 months. We're going to get you up to $1,000 a day. And he did it for, I think, about 2 weeks. And after the 2 weeks, he sort of didn't phone me, and he was phoning me, 2 or 3 times. Going, oh yeah, another customer's accepted it, and I'm really happy. And then it sort of just fell off the radar, and I got busy and didn't really say anything to him. And then I saw him, probably at the end of that 3-month period at a next franchise meeting, and I said, oh, how's everything going? And he said, mate, I'm now my average daily target is $1,500. I've now been able to push my clients up to that amount of money. And he says, I've got one offsider making $1,500 a day. Mate, I couldn't be happier. Life is great, and this is the best thing I've ever done. And from then, it's just a conversation where he saw what he needed to do, highlighted it to him. He went and made it happen. And it's such a good story, and it makes me feel good about what I do to help them in their business.
I love doing that. That's why I asked, because there's so many stories of those in everyone's regions as well. And it's great to hear that he's doing really, really well now. And I hear sometimes a lot of franchisees sometimes feel weird about charging what they're worth, and others don't. But obviously that guy was worth that rate, which is why customers stick with him and he's not going to work back.
I think the number one problem that you have is people come from, it may be a factory or something like that, where they've made $1,200 for the week, and that's all their brain thinks about is $1,200 a week. And unfortunately, once you get in business, there's other costs that are associated with it. So you have to set your sights a little bit higher than $1,200.
Yeah, you're right. It's a behavioural thing. Yeah, you're right. They've been working 20 years in a factory or something, and they're used to that. It could be almost like a weird thing, or I don't feel as I deserve it, or something like that. It's a really weird mindset thing they've got to get out of. But great to hear from that franchisee and how well he's doing. Now, I'm going to close with this, which is the Landscape Association. You guys have just done I think it's a sponsorship with the Landscape Association. They've got a massive following online. So we're going to just talk a bit about that, why have you chose to associate yourself with them, and talk through that one.
We decided to go ahead with the sponsorship largely because they've got a lot of aspects of the business that they have that I think can open a lot of the doors for the franchisees in respect to seeing a lot of different new landscape practices and other things that they bring to the table, which is fantastic. They have a lot of ongoing learning. So they put on podcasts and stuff similar to gyms, but they do it for the landscapers. So instead of saying, okay, well, what's the award? What's some of these things? They have a lot of that's all set up by the association, which then means that the franchise owners are able to tap into that resource. And when we're getting that out to them as we speak, to be able to utilize that capacity. But the other aspect was we went to what they had as a trade day at Ride TAFE. And it was really noticeable that there was a lot of young guys there who are doing landscaping, who I dare say at some stage will finish their apprenticeship or do get to a stage where what's next for them. And I suppose that's where we were looking at it, was if they decide to branch out and do their own thing and possibly look to go into business for themselves. I think, obviously with Jim's name and the fact that we're there and we're a part of that whole process, we believe we've got something great to offer, especially guys that are coming from the industry. As I said before, because we don't have any fail rates with guys that have come from landscaping or greenkeeping, they're the perfect candidates to come into the gym system to be able to take on a franchise and grow their income based on the fact that they're running their own business under the gym's banner.
Absolutely. And obviously, if you listened to this before, we'd have to go over the benefits again. But I think, for the first time in business, I think, if you want to reduce your risk, I think it's a no-brainer to come with Jim's Mowing. And obviously, they can take landscaping leads, and they would be flat out if they do great work. So landscaping, we didn't talk about too much, but how many guys in your region are sort of doing landscaping type work?
Oh, I'd probably say about 20%, so about 40 guys out of 200 would be doing a fair bit of landscaping. There's only a handful that do the structural stuff, but they've come from building backgrounds. They've got the necessary tickets to be able to do that stuff. And when guys get the bigger work, they send it to those guys, which is fantastic because it's always good that they cross-pollinate and help each other like that, which is really good. But yeah, there's quite a lot of them that do and can do a lot of that other landscape type work, but we get a fair bit of it, which helps.
And would there be an opportunity for them to brand as Jim's Landscaping? Because I've seen a few trailers and vehicles online, or how does that work in your region?
Oh yeah, we had one. He decided that it was a bit too heavy for him.
Right.
So he went back to the maintenance. He was doing a lot of and he found that there was a lot more of the heavy structural stuff that came, which he wasn't really particularly that interested in. He was an older gentleman, so I think the wear and tear on the landscaping side of things finally got to him. So he decided just to go back to being branded maintenance. But again, if the franchise owners want to do landscaping and then also run a maintenance crew that runs off the back of the landscaping, that gives them plenty of opportunity inside the gym's framework.
I think a lot more 22, 23, 24-year-old guys come through. I think I've met a few have come through who have come from a horticultural background or landscaping and worked with someone else and doing gyms making it as their vehicle. What else would you sort of say to those guys who are doing their apprenticeships about it? Let's say they get to the end of their apprenticeship and making the decision. What would be the best thing for them to do? Is it maybe go on an observation day, or what would you sort of advise them?
Definitely go for an observation day. There is quite a lot of the guys that are in that sort of 20 to 25 age bracket in gyms already. I suppose spending some time out with them and seeing the sort of income that they're making from what they're doing may be something that puts the seed in their head that this could be the opportunity for them at some stage. It doesn't necessarily need to be straight away, but like anything, it never hurts to have a look at different options, see whether you think it might be a good fit for you, and then reach out and obviously go through the process of working out whether it's going to be a good fit.
And what would you sort of maybe say to younger people looking at gyms? Because I know we've done a bit of media here about obviously you're told the uni route or you're told the trade route and nothing else, whereas you've got a lot more younger guys now, 21, 22, maybe looking at gyms as an option as their future career. So maybe what would you sort of say to younger people, besides doing observation there, what other things would you sort of address them to look at maybe?
The first thing they really need to do is sit down with someone and have a good conversation about what it is that they want. Because ultimately they're still very young. They may or may not necessarily have a path or a career path that they've considered. But business is certainly one that I think with the younger generation these days, they're certainly becoming a lot more entrepreneurial with all the different videos that are out there. And something like a gyms is, in my opinion, a great option for them because it's in the service-based industry, which is growing. Doesn't seem like it's stopping anytime soon. That would be certainly one that I'd be encouraging them to come and have a chat with gyms. Have a look into it. Like anything, bring anyone that you want along for that journey. So if you've got your dad, your mum, auntie, whoever that you believe should come along and get a better understanding of the business itself, by all means bring them along to something because we'll ultimately answer your questions and theirs because we want the same outcome. We want a successful guy in the business doing what he wants and making the money that they really want to do from something like this.
A question a bit, finance options. Do you have finance options available in your region, or how does that sort of work with that?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate in regards to finding a couple of finance partners that have been really good. One of them, they can basically lend to anyone who's got a full-time job and has serviceability, which is really fantastic for anyone coming in who doesn't necessarily have the funding. And then there's another specialised franchising model that also can help with some of the resale type businesses. You do need a 40% input of capital, but ultimately they can help you get into all facets of the business, whether it's new or existing business.
No, it's great to hear. So don't let people think that you need all that money up front. If you don't, just inquire with the franchisors because they might have an option, like Chris just said, for them as well. And Chris, before we end today, I was going to say, what do you love about being for gyms for so long? Because I think a good side of a franchise system is the longevity of a lot of people. So you've been 20 plus years in the system. You would have a lot of franchisees who have been 15 years, 20 years with the system as well. So what keeps you involved with Gyms Mowing so long, and what do you love about it?
I'd probably say the number one thing I love about it is the ability to help some of these guys in getting out of where they are, where they're really not happy, into something that changes their life. It's changed my life. I've loved my journey with gyms. There's been some good and bad moments, but I've loved my time with gyms because ultimately you get to help people. Seeing the change in people when they come in scared, they're not really sure about themselves, getting to learn the whole process of being in business for themselves. You're speaking to them 6 months, 12 months, 2 years later at a franchise meeting or something like that. And they just said, mate, the day you talked me into jumping in on board with gyms, and I said, I didn't talk you into it. I gave you all the reasons that you should, but it's ultimately your decision, mate. But they always, have a bit of a laugh about it and say, it's the best decision I've ever made. That's music to my ears. If I could guarantee everyone's success 100% of the time, I'd be a very, very happy man, because ultimately you get to change lives and make an impact on people.
There you go. So thank you very much, Simon, for your time today, Chris. And if anyone's interested, call 131546 or jimsmowing.com.au. That goes for any regional franchisor. Observation day, information pack, and I'll tell you everything you need to know. But Chris, thank you very much for your time today. For those who don't know as well, as I said before at the start, Chris's families have been very, very longly involved with the Jim's Group brand and the Jim's Mowing brand. And obviously your father was very instrumental in setting up everything in the early days, and yourself as well in growing the mowing division as well. So if you do inquire and you're in Chris's region, you've got a really good person that can help you get to where you need to get to. So thank you very much for your time today, Chris. We appreciate it.
No problems. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you for listening to the episode of the More Than Just Mowing podcast by Jim's Mowing. If you do need help with your local gardening expert, please give us a call at 131 546 for Australia, 0800 454 654 for New Zealand, or head to jimsmowing.com.au or jimsmowing.co.nz. If you liked what you heard, please make sure you leave us a review as well, wherever you consume your podcast. We appreciate your support. And until next episode, we hope you have a great week.